Welcome. Welcome back to another episode of Shadow School. Today we're playing it low key. It's like really looks a little stormy outside, so I'm trying to find my light in the house right now. I don't know if I'm succeeding or not here, but I'm in a shadow at Shadow School right now. Today we're focused on the 9th gene key, which is the Shadow of Inertia, the gift of determination, and the Siddhi or divine gift of invincibility. I'm your host, Brianna Elise Miller. Thank you for joining me today. And I hope you've had a chance to catch some of the previous episodes of Shadow School. We've been really diving into all of these gene key shadows, 1 through 8 so far. Today we've got number 9. And this one is such a short one in the book. It's such a short little description. Some of these go on for like 20 pages, and this one's like 5 pages, which I think is really appropriate given that the Chinese I Ching gate name for this is the taming power of the small. And we're really going to focus on the power of our tiny actions and behaviors over time and how they either create a sense of inertia and dread and victimization in our life, or they help us establish well-worn grooves and patterns and habits that over time help us really live into our greater purpose and our greater reason for being. So that's what's on offer for us in today's gene key. We're going to dive right into the shadow of inertia, which is where we always begin. We always begin in the shadow. Here, we find ourselves stuck in the unnecessary, irrelevant details of our lives. Like if you can imagine a life in the weeds, this is it. We are just trapped in the mundane, the right in front of us in the moment, the drama that's unfolding. We cannot see beyond it. And that's because we have this dilemma in the 9th gene key of perspective. And sometimes we get trapped in the small. And we can only see this narrow view. And we're living these really busy, distracted lives where we're just kind of getting by. We're the victim of the tiny details around us. These details are taming us in this case. This results in us feeling like we have no energy. We get bitter and resentful. Our whole life force is kind of sapped. Doing even the smallest thing feels like it takes such an enormous amount of willpower. And we get so robbed of any joy or enthusiasm for our life, even if we're about to go work on something or create something that we're actually really lit up about. The actual tasks of it feel hard and difficult and like we're not making any traction. This is because we've lost perspective. We've lost a connection to and a focus on our greater dream in life, our greater purpose in life. Now, if you watched previous episodes, you might have heard me mention just generally that your purpose is not something that you do. It's not something that you seek or you achieve outside of yourself. It's not some end goal like I'm here, I've arrived, I've achieved my purpose. It is you expressing yourself and fully stepping into the wholeness and uniqueness of your own gifts and bringing that unique essence and quality into every aspect of everything that you do in life. That is simply your purpose. It's to be you. It's simply to be you and to bring that to everything. So there's no there. There's no place to get to. There's no end destination. But we're so focused on time and achieving things and external success and having stuff like money and a house and followers and a specific job and having created something that others can look to, that we're really focused on outcomes. And so we're really focused on taking the outcome and breaking it down to all these little bits and then just like slogging our way through the work in order to create it. We're not worried about being happy in the moment, living our purpose in the moment, finding joy in these details. We're just trying to get them done as fast and as efficiently as possible so that we can achieve the thing that we want to have at the end. But what happens when our tiny tasks, our little actions, our habits, our daily efforts are not connected to something that is actually a bigger dream, a bigger vision? And I don't mean necessarily something outside of ourselves. I'm talking about the big dream of being the fullest version of you and whatever that entails, whatever is created as a result of that. When we disconnect from that dream, every one of these tasks is hard going. It's like Sisyphus rolling the boulder up the mountain. It feels like we are just stuck in the weeds. There's no ability to pop our heads up and see over the grass. That's all we've got in the moment. And as a result, what happens is we never seem to get where we want to go. And I'm going to use this analogy. It was in the Gene Keys book, which I think is really great. So in this frequency, in the shadow here of inertia, what we find is that we are standing on a rock, okay, in the water. Let's say you're just on a stepping stone and you're just looking down at this stepping stone. And when you're in the shadow frequency of being tamed by all the details, of losing the perspective of the greater purpose for you being here on earth, not the things you want to achieve external to yourself. Every time you take a step to the next stepping stone, it feels like you're making progress. It feels like you're going somewhere, but you actually can't see where you're going because you're so focused on that immediate task. And in the shadow, those immediate tasks are stepping stones that are arranged in a circle. You just don't have the perspective to see that they're shaped in a circle. And so you're stepping from stone to stone to stone, only seeing and stepping onto the stone in front of you, unable to rise up and take a big picture view to see that you're just running around in circles. You're not actually going anywhere. In fact, you're trapped in a repetitive pattern, which we'll get into with the reactive and the repressive state here in a second. And when we're trapped in this pattern, we start to get really worn down. We need a ton of willpower to take the next step. We have a huge drain on our energy, on our physical body, on our resilience. And it really allows that mind to creep in and say all of the nasty things about how we're not getting anything done, how we're never doing enough, how we aren't enough. Self-doubt comes in. We lose confidence because it doesn't feel like we're actually making any true progress. Everything feels so hard, and it doesn't feel like there's a way to see out of it. So it feels like we're trapped here in this cycle, in this pattern. We've become a victim of the small. We have no perspective. Let's talk a little bit about the reactive state here. And the reactive state, I always start with the repressive state. Let me back up for a second. The repressive state, got my notes flipped here, is reluctant. The repressive state is where we have that introverted energy that kind of folds in on itself. The energy of the life force drains from the surface of your life and you come more inward. Here, we feel really, really acutely that we are a victim, that we don't know that we're a victim. We're not necessarily using that language, but what we feel is stuck. We feel paralyzed here, even though we're doing so much stuff. And we feel like we cannot change the situation. We have no power. And then even our will, our own willpower, our own kind of strength to rise up and break out of this cycle, we have a sense of paralysis around it. So it feels really frustrating while we're there because we may even experience being in this frozen state where we really desperately want to change it, but we're kind of like watching ourselves like a third party, and we are just like, why are you not able to do something differently here? But there's some kind of paralysis happening where no matter how much willpower you have, it's like not quite enough energy to get you out of this rut that you're in. And so you're just watching yourself, and then you're judging, and then your mind comes in and it starts to reinforce, and you get even more stuck and dug in and frozen there. And it's a terrible feeling to be there. I know I've definitely been there in my life before. We have this deep-seated fear in here. And the fear could be any number of things that's actually preventing us from taking action, depending on what the actions are, or changing our pattern, depending on what the pattern is that we are stuck in here, because it could be any number of things. It could be related to being seen or success, like we were talking about yesterday. It could be related to not being enough and not wanting to open yourself to connection in a relationship and taking the steps to do that. There are so many patterns here that we could be reinforcing with this repressive state of a reluctant. But ultimately, the only thing that gets us out of this is not anyone else seeing and pulling us out. It's not external circumstances. It's us. We are the ones that have the power to get ourselves out of this. And usually it takes some type of breakthrough or some type of breakdown where we just finally say enough, and the world shifts, our perspective shifts. We can actually see the truth even for just a sparkling, glimmering moment. And that gives us enough energy and willpower to shift out of this pattern that we're trapped in. If that doesn't happen, we kind of go into a miserable, like, decline into misery. And I think like we've seen this archetype in like movies of this old curmudgeony man that's like a recluse now, and he lives on his own, and he can't open his heart to anybody, and he's really gruff and grumbly, and he's just decided he's going to be miserable. That's kind of like where this goes to. Although that man might be a little bit more reactive as an archetype than repressive, but you understand what I'm saying here. We kind of sink into this misery, and like nothing but ourselves can pull us out of that. Nothing. And then we look at the reactive state here, which is more of that external, extroverted expression. And here we get diverted is the state. And these people, when we're stuck in the diverted state of the shadow of inertia, we're really restless. So this is like distracted, fidgety, frenetic. Like, again, this is kind of like seeking outward to fix and suppress and ignore the shadow, ignore the fears, ignore the fact that we don't feel like our actions are meaningfully contributing to something bigger in our lives. And this looks like we are seeking any kind of stimulus that will distract us and draw any type of energy out of our system and out of our body, because we've got a lot of like pent up energy. We've got a lot of pent up anger. Again, there's usually some anger expression in the reactive state. And so we have a huge escapism thing. There's huge avoidance, distracting, diverting the energy that we have. So the energy that could be used toward bringing your gifts online and sharing them with the world and taking intentional actions in order to live your purpose fully. We're unable to put that energy there, but the energy has to go somewhere in this reactive state. And so it gets funneled into all these escapist tendencies and actions. And this takes a huge toll, again, on the body. It's like physically exhausting to constantly be like pushing out and going and doing. And the other thing I think is funny, because I can see this in examples in real life, is it takes a huge toll on finances. So people that have this escapist, diverted tendency or reactive state in the shadow are like the ones that are like always like taking the spontaneous trip and digging themselves into some kind of a program or whatever it is. Not that those things are necessarily only there for diversion. Like, those things exist for great purposes. However, this is like an unending need to pour your energy into this as a means of distraction and as a means of getting rid of this excess energy that you don't know how to funnel into living a life of intention and purpose. And so it just begins to like pull the energy out of you, and the finances start going because you're spending loads of money on trying to escape the life that you don't love and you feel trapped in. And here we have an inertia of fulfillment, which I think is really fascinating to think about. Inertia of fulfillment. And what's really interesting here is that there's the people that are stuck in this shadow state are so restless and fidgety, and they're really focused. They have to get this energy out somewhere, but they desperately need to rest and relax. Because only in the rest and the relaxation, only in the softening, can we actually reconnect back into understanding what is fulfilling to us and reconnect with who we are. Only in a sense of stillness and peace can we remember actually who we are, what we're here to do. That's our bigger purpose that we can connect to and then take action toward that. But if we cannot pause at all, we cannot rest or relax, and we are constantly pushing outward and diverting our energy to other things that distract us, that's where we get this inertia of fulfillment. And it's really hard to maintain any sense of strong relationship or commitment or to achieve anything of real fulfillment and meaning in life because they're constantly like squirrel, 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 squirrel. Now, like all of these gene keys, I always feel like I can identify with aspects of both of these. I feel like I've been in both of these energies in my life. Mostly where I feel like I can identify is just the fact that it feels like sometimes we're trapped in doing so many things. When we look external, you hear my dog getting some water. Teddy's thirsty. When we look outside of ourselves for all the things that we should do, for all the things that we think that we have to do, because there are examples for us to imitate. Like you're starting a new business. Here are the 30 things you have to do to make that work. You want to sell courses online. Here are the 18 funnels you have to go build and the 35 emails you have to go create. It's just endless. The amount of crap there is that people will tell you to do is endless. And if we buy into that, and we do it because we think that we should or think that we have to in order to achieve something, especially something that's external to us, that isn't us necessarily living our purpose. Like maybe it's related to a project at work or something. That just sucks the energy out of us. And we get really tamed in the power of the small. Here we are tamed by these details that we think we have to do. If we can actually pause for a moment and refocus and have some perspective, we can get out of the mind trying to tell us exactly all the things it thinks we have to do, and instead find the appropriate and right ways to invest and focus our energy in the moment so that we can bring our full capability online to anything that we're working on. I'm going to have to get a dog to stop barking 1 second. Buddy, Mama needs you to stop. Oh, baby. Oh, my goodness. You little squeaker. Teddy's a squeaker. He likes to bark. Teddy. Oh, such a baby. Okay, so we are focused on now shifting out of the shadow into the gift of determination. Earlier, I shared about how when we are stuck in the shadow, we're on those stepping stones looking down, and we're unable to see that the stones are actually arranged in a circle, and we're going nowhere. When we enter into the gift of determination, we actually have the stepping stones aligned out in front of us, and we can see that they're lined up out in front of us. We cannot see, however, where they end. They just continue off in perpetuity to the horizon and beyond. And we don't have the ability to see where they go. We don't see the end result, but we do see that we are going in a direction and that we are making progress with every step that we take toward a certain direction. Very different from walking around in circles and going around in circles. What happens in the gift of determination is that we have a shift out of relying on our mind to tell us and shape where and what we should focus our mind and our attention and our work on, what task we should do next in order to get XYZ, in order to achieve some kind of future that we can never actually plan for or identify correctly. Instead of that, we have the mind kind of take a back seat and no longer undermines our natural destiny. And instead, we use focus. And focus allows us to be deliberate and present on the immediate task in front of us, knowing full well that if we focused our energy on something that allows us to express our natural full purpose in life, that is connected to a greater dream, that we don't have to worry about what is coming in the future. We don't have to know what is on the horizon. Humans tend to, and I think business makes this like such a bigger phenomenon than it would naturally be if we didn't have business and work and, like these outcomes we're trying to create and money we're trying to earn. But what we do a lot is we set these goals. We set 3-year, 5-year, 10-year, 50-year goals, and we think that we're going to get there. In reality, we have no idea what's possible. And when we set these goals, first of all, we narrow what's possible, but we also pretend like we're actually in charge. We're not. We're not in charge. And usually if we're laying a goal, like an outcome goal, with a specific timeline on top of our lives and our efforts, it's actually restricting what could be possible, but it's also just kind of funny in a way, because it's a guess, and it's usually probably a bad guess of what could possibly happen. We're pretending, it's like we're playing work. It's like we're playing purpose. If we were a kid that's playing store or playing school, and they're pretending that they're the teacher and they're doing things and they're writing on the board and they're giving the other kids the assignment. That's a little bit what I feel like the energetic is behind this goal setting tendency that we have, this very linear way of looking at things. The truth is, as it relates to our purpose as humans, which, as I shared earlier, is not an outcome. It is a practice of fostering and being the truest you and bringing that true you and that quality into everything that you do in life, no matter what the thing is, no matter if it's cooking dinner for your family or speaking to an audience or serving someone in your community. All of those things can be an expression of your purpose because it's simply an expression of you. It's an intentional act performed by you. So here we really shift from the mind driving our small actions to having focus. And this quote from Aleister Crowley is really, really good because it really clarifies that our actions need to be intentional. So here's the quote: "Every intentional act is a magical act." Every intentional act is a magical act. To me, this means that every act that we have a clear, pure intention on, and I want to clarify the difference between agenda and intention. Agenda is me forcing a way of things, me wanting things to be a certain way, me attached to a certain outcome. I want the meeting to go this way. I want to achieve this objective. I want you to change this behavior. That's an example of having an agenda. Having an intention or being intentional, there's a shift there already from having to being. means that we know that we're showing up a certain way and that we want to cultivate something as a result of how we show up. So it looks a little something like, I want to cultivate more connection. I have the intention to cultivate more connection in my life, which means I'm going to show up and lead from the heart in everything that I do. That's an intention. So if we enter into our acts, even the smallest, tiniest acts, with intention, instead of agenda of trying to get something or have something, but from a way of being in our actions, then every act is magical because every act is creative. Every act actually allows you to express your purpose. So that's just such a beautiful quote. And that's where we're sitting in this gift of determination. Every single intentional act allows you to express your purpose through that tiny action. And when these tiny actions are made with intention, they create our world. Think about an action that is performed out of fear or out of resentment or out of should energy. What does that create more of? It creates more, it perpetuates like this victim state that you don't have control or agency. It creates more fear and resentment. And on the other side, think about acts that are performed through an intention and with an energy of service and joy. What do those create? More joy. So that's what we're going for here. A real intention behind the actions that we take, even when they're tiny, even when they may have seemed mundane in our lives. They have the potential to ripple out and create more of what they're founded in. And the sustained activity that we have over time, it starts to create these powerful grooves in our lives. And I love this word groove because it really reminds me of neural networks and changing behaviors and creating new habits. Is that when we actually create new neural pathways through doing things differently than we would have before, at first, they're really uncomfortable. They feel so unnatural. And we have this energy that we need in order to like get over the hump of the discomfort. It's called activation energy. And in science, that's like how much energy is needed to have a chemical reaction. In behavior, that's like how much willpower and energy do we need to have to create and sustain a change in behavior that at first feels unnatural, but then over time allows it to become natural because we create this well-worn groove. That's what we're doing when we change our behaviors or our habits, when we rework some of our patterns that we may have that we've been in the loop of in our shadows. We actually create new grooves. And when the grooves get deep enough, it becomes a channel through which our energy can flow, and it flows naturally and easily. So that's what we're getting here in the gift of determination. Not only is every act an intentional act that creates and fosters more of the same energy it was started with, but we start to compound our efforts over time by creating these channels and grooves through which our energy can flow. And what happens as a result is that it takes less energy and willpower over time to continue performing these tiny intentional acts. It becomes way easier. We're in the flow of it. And what we get is a sense of momentum. And this momentum, once it starts to go fast enough, it feels like it's totally unstoppable. So not only are we creating this flow and this groove of being our purpose in life and intentionally fostering acts, even the tiniest things like feeding the dogs, putting on your moisturizer in the morning, doing them with love because they're serving your purpose of being the you that you are. But once we start to do it so frequently and with so much intention behind it, we create this unstoppable momentum. And then we're just a force. We are just a force of living our purpose, which is extraordinary. And when that's happening and that flow is occurring, we become highly magnetic. Others are drawn to us. The right opportunities come through. Synchronicities are firing all of the time. We are literally drawing in the energy that we are creating through this momentum of intention that we have, through this determination. And our mind stops trying to undermine us. It stops trying to give us this new list of shoulds we should go create. And oh, look, but that person over there is doing these things. Maybe you should add this to your groove. And, it stops doing that. It starts to soften, starts to get quieter. And instead, it starts to go, oh, yeah, like this direction's actually really good. Here's why. Look at all the things you're creating over here. Here's why. Look at the feedback you're getting. And oh, that opportunity just came through. You must be on the right direction. It starts to logically actually support and make valid the actions and the directions and the grooves that you're creating through your determination. And here we find that we're not tamed by the small. The small is actually where the power lies. Because we're doing these small acts over and over and over again, we have this compounding momentum that we've created. And there is an infinitesimal power inside of these small intentional acts. Then we get into the Siddhi, the divine gift of invincibility. And this is where we really need to soften. Instead of being drawn to things, driving to things, we're drawn to things. We're not driving toward them. We're not trying to make them happen. Here, anything that can or will happen for you does. Anything that you want to try to make happen, not even possible. We're not here to make things happen. Here, we're in a state of flow instead of a state of force and fix. And here is where I have a couple of lines directly from the book I'd like to read. Invincibility is merging your individual awareness back into the consciousness of the universe. When we do this, when we allow our individual awareness to merge back into the oneness, the unity consciousness, it dissolves all of our boundaries. It dissolves all need for differentiation and boundary. And when we don't have any boundaries, that means we are one with everything else, which means there's nothing to protect against, which means that we're truly defenseless and invincible at the same time. Because there's nothing to protect against. It's just beautiful. And here we surrender to all possible foes by dissolving our reality into them. We dissolve into the will of the universe. So determination, when we're in this gift, we start to recognize, and even the mind starts to quiet itself because it finally recognizes that really we're moving when we're in these grooves and we create this flow with our tiny intentional acts aligned with our purpose and the dream of who we are, that we're actually moving in a divine rhythm that had already existed. We've just clicked into it. It's like we've just tuned into the right channel. And that can feel like predetermination, and that gets people very witchy when they think about like free will versus destiny. But there's so much freedom in aligning with your natural rhythms, the natural you that was here and destined to be here as you. And this is where that momentum and that magnetism really starts to come online. And when we sink into that, we allow ourselves to kind of dissolve into that destiny. We also really see and have the perspective, here's that dilemma again, the perspective that there is no separation. We are just a unique expression of this consciousness, this one singular consciousness. And when we actually merge back into that consciousness, we recognize that we're not even that individual expression. We're just part of everything. We soften into that and we are totally invincible, which is beautiful. So here we are, taming the power of the small, feeling like we're ruled by these tiny little actions we have to do every day. And at the end of the spectrum, we are fully dissolved into everything and invincible. I feel like that's a huge reach from the shadow to the Siddhi today. Sometimes I think these are like little stepping stones, like we were talking about, and it's really clear how you get from one to the next. And I feel like it is very clear how we move out of the shadow into the gift today, from inertia to determination. I'm personally going to need a little bit more contemplation on how I move into this and feel into this and be in this Siddhic consciousness. That's where I'm sitting today. So I'd be curious to hear your thoughts. Where do you feel like you are getting trapped by the power of the small? Do you feel like your tiny little behaviors and habits every day are really ramping up into this beautiful flow, this groove that you've created that is aligned with your purpose of who you are being in the moment? I want to hear from you. So if you listen to this episode of Shadow School, please leave me a note. Let me know what's coming through for you on this one. Until tomorrow, we will see you again with another shadow. Have an amazing day. I hope the sunshine comes out and you have a beautiful day. That's what I'm wishing for myself. Have an awesome one. Thanks for joining me.